Imagine you have something urgent to say, something you want, something you see, something you feel so strongly it fills your entire chest. And the only way you can get it out, the only tool you have, is a single word, maybe two. That is the world your baby lives in right now. At around 12 to 15 months, most toddlers have somewhere between 5 and 20 words. They understand vastly more than they can say. They know what a dog is. They know what no means. They recognize your voice from across the house. But the bridge between what they understand and what they can express? It's still a rope bridge. Narrow. Precarious. One word at a time. And then, somewhere around 18 months, something extraordinary happens. Picture a Tuesday, nothing special about it. You're in the kitchen. Your toddler toddles in, holds up a banana, and says clearly, unmistakably, Nana. You hand it over. You move on. But then, something shifts. Over the following days, you start noticing it. A new word on Monday. 2 new words by Wednesday. By the following week, they're pointing at a bird outside the window and trying to say bird. They're hearing you say shoe and repeating it back, testing it in their mouth like something they've just discovered has a flavor. Within a matter of weeks, some toddlers go from 20 words to 200. Developmental psychologists call it the vocabulary explosion, or the word spurt. Parents usually call it the moment their child suddenly started talking. And what makes it remarkable, what makes it one of the most dramatic cognitive events in all of human development, is not just how fast it happens. It's what had to be built. Quietly. Invisibly. For months beforehand. Just so this one moment could occur. Your child didn't suddenly get smarter at 18 months. They finally crossed a threshold that their brain had been building toward for their entire life. To understand what triggers the vocabulary explosion, you have to go back much further than 18 months. You have to go back to the very first weeks of life. From the moment your newborn entered the world, their auditory cortex, the part of the brain that processes sound, began doing something extraordinary. It began sorting. Every sound your baby heard was being analyzed, catalogued, and compared. Your voice, your partner's voice, the rhythm of the language spoken around them, all of it was being used to build what neuroscientists call a phonetic map, an internal template of the sounds that matter in your language versus the sounds that don't. By around 6 months, your baby had already become a specialist. They could distinguish the sounds of their native language with stunning precision, and they had begun to lose sensitivity to sounds from languages they hadn't heard. Their brain was pruning itself, eliminating unnecessary pathways and strengthening the ones that mattered. This is not a loss. This is the brain becoming efficient. Then, somewhere between 8 and 12 months, something else began. Your baby started to segment, to hear the stream of speech around them, which, to a brand new brain, sounds like one long, unbroken ribbon of sound, and begin to pull words out of it. They didn't know what those words meant yet, but they were learning where words begin and where they end. This is called statistical learning, and your baby was doing it every single day, without any effort, simply by being bathed in language. Now comes the piece that makes the vocabulary explosion possible. The piece Jean Piaget would call a fundamental cognitive reorganization. Around 15 to 18 months, something matures in the prefrontal cortex and the temporal parietal junction regions involved in symbolic thinking and cross-modal association. Your toddler begins to grasp, at a new and deeper level, what a word actually is. Not just a sound, not just a noise that reliably precedes something happening, but a symbol, an arbitrary sequence of sounds that stands for something in the world, permanently, consistently, across all contexts. This is the principle of reference. And it sounds simple until you realize that no other species on the planet acquires it the way humans do. Once a toddler genuinely understands that everything has a name, that the word is not attached to one particular dog in one particular moment, but refers to the concept of dog everywhere, always the vocabulary explosion becomes inevitable. It's not a gradual climb anymore. It's a cascade. Their brain has built the architecture. Now the words pour in. And here's what makes this even more remarkable. The neural circuitry supporting this leap. The connections between Broca's area, which governs language production, and Wernicke's area, which governs language comprehension, has been under construction since before your baby could hold their own head up. Every book you read aloud, every time you narrated what you were doing around the house, every conversation you had with a baby who could only respond with a coo, all of it was laying cable. All of it was building toward this. You were the construction crew. You just didn't know it. The vocabulary explosion doesn't just change how your toddler communicates, it reorganizes their entire inner world. Before words, your toddler's emotions were immediate and total. Frustration arrived like a wave, formless, overwhelming, with no vocabulary to process it or contain it. Distress had nowhere to go except out, physically, loudly. Think of the tantrums not as defiance, but as the experience of feelings too large for the container. Words begin to change that container. When a toddler can say more instead of screaming, something shifts neurologically. The act of labeling an experience, finding the word for it, activates the prefrontal cortex and slightly dampens the amygdala's alarm signal. Language, even at its most elementary, begins to give a child the first primitive tools of emotional regulation. It will take years to develop fully, but the vocabulary explosion is where it begins. There's also a profound social shift happening. Before the word spurt, your toddler communicated at you, reaching, pointing, crying. After it, they begin communicating with you. The dynamic is no longer a series of needs being broadcast. It becomes something closer to a dialogue. And that shift from broadcasting to conversing is the first step toward genuine shared meaning, toward the experience of being truly known by another person. Watch for something else in the weeks following the word spurt. The pointing becomes more sophisticated. Your toddler will point at things not because they want them, but simply to share them with you. They see a bird. They point. They look at you to see your reaction. This is called declarative pointing, and it marks the emergence of what psychologists call joint attention, the ability to share a mental focus with another person. It seems small. It is, in fact, one of the cornerstones of human consciousness. It is how your child begins to understand that other people have minds that can be brought into their own experience, minds that can be invited to see what they see. Language didn't just give your child words, it gave them access to other people's inner worlds. Now, a word about timing, because this is where the anxiety tends to creep in, and it deserves to be addressed directly with the full picture. The range of typical development for the vocabulary explosion is genuinely wide. Most toddlers show a notable word spurt somewhere between 16 and 24 months. Some begin earlier, some begin later. Both are entirely consistent with healthy neurological development. At 18 months, a word count of anywhere from 10 words to 200 words can fall within the typical range, depending on the child, the family's language environment, and whether the child is acquiring more than one language simultaneously. Bilingual and multilingual toddlers in particular often show slightly different timelines, not because their development is slower, but because their brain is doing significantly more work, building parallel systems simultaneously. The vocabulary explosion still comes. It simply maps differently across two languages at once. What matters far more than the precise number of words is the trajectory. Is your toddler engaged? Are they attempting to communicate, even without many words? Are they understanding what's said to them? Is their back and forth interaction growing richer? If those things are true, the threshold is being approached. The architecture is being built. The cascade is coming. 200,000 years of human evolution produced the language instinct. Hundreds of thousands of years of mothers and fathers speaking to their children, naming the world, narrating the day, answering the babbles refined it. And right now, in your living room, in your kitchen, on your daily walk, that same ancient process is unfolding inside the person you love most. Your child is not just learning to talk. They are crossing one of the most significant thresholds in all of human cognitive development. They are building the architecture of meaning. They are learning that their inner world can be shared. Tonight, watch your toddler point at something and look at you to see if you saw it too. Now you know what you're actually seeing.